you remember the first time you stepped into an arena to witness a collision of good versus evil? The excitement in the air, the roar of the crowd, and of course, the blood. It's time to relive those memories big time. A historical wrestling lesson taught by your professors, the legendary Terry Sullivan and Supermouth Dave Drayson. RoX-TV and International Big Time Wrestling present Big Time Memories.
Ladies and gentlemen, Big Time Memories is on the air. I'm Terry Sullivan along with my good friend Dave Drayson, and we have some extra special treats for you today, Dave, don't we?
Oh, what are we doing today?
All sorts of just miscellaneous things. We're going to do some corrections. You know, every time we do, not every time, but a lot of times we do a story, then one of the good people who watches the show will let us know, no, it wasn't quite that. That wasn't quite the way it happened. So we do want to set the record straight, and we will do that as we get to our corrections a little bit later on in the show.
Is this a Dressing Room Confidential episode again?
This is Dressing Room Confidential.
Oh, one of my favorites.
Got a lot of individuals to talk about, and I think you're going to find it interesting. As a matter of fact, I know there is a tape that you were involved with many years ago in one of the smaller promotions you worked with Ronnie Martinelli and Louis Martinez. Wasn't there something about a feat of strength that Mr. Martinelli was? Oh,
I'll have to tell you that story. Well, first and foremost, it was the Continental Wrestling Association. It was a Louis Martinez and Ron Martinelli promotion that, you know, at the time, Louis was working for the Sheik, and so was Martinelli and a few other guys that were, you know, on our shows. You know, Fred Curry, Bobby Fulton, you know, came in for that one, and some other guys. And what we did is George Cannon ended up doing some promos for us, you know, and we bought time on the Sheik's Saturday, you know, TV show, and they showed our promos. So, you know, instead of his.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
That created a real uproar.
Very exciting news. There is a new wrestling faction in Michigan, and the home of the professional wrestling in Michigan will now be the Hockey Land in Fraser, Michigan.
So, you know, what it was is Ron Martinelli was involved in an accident. He was coming out of a dry cleaners with his clothing because he was scheduled to go down to work in Florida, you know, with Dusty Rhodes and Eddie Graham and those guys. And coming out of the dry cleaners, this woman, you know, put her car in the wrong gear. Instead of going forward, she came backwards, and she pinned, you know, her car, you know, pinned Ron up against the wall of the cleaners. But his strength, because he was a good bodybuilder, he held it off until she was able to, you know, put it in neutral and get out of gear. Man. And he won, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know, in a lawsuit.
But he was seriously hurt.
Yeah, but he recovered. And, you know, we figured, you know, with his winnings from that lawsuit, what better way to lose your money than to start a wrestling promotion?
Yeah, there's a lot of history there.
Yeah, so him and Louis Martinez started the Continental Wrestling Association. So for our first show, we ended up going into Louis Martinez's basement, and Brian Buchanan's, Gary Camasak, Gary Mancuso.
Now, who were those names? People aren't going to know their names.
They were, you know, photographers, you know, back then. And we had Brian's brother do our commentary. Brian Ashley, I think his name he used. So we had Louis would do a promo, myself and Blackjack Luca did a promo, we busted in on one of Louis' promos, and then Ron Martinelli, he's going against the Mad Iranian.
Ooh, the Mad Iranian.
This was at a time in 1980 when there was 50 American hostages held up in Iran. You know, the Shah of Iran, you know, had these, you know, and, you know, I believe it was President Nixon who was trying to, you know, get them out.
Reagan
and,
a little bit later than Nixon.
Oh, okay.
Nixon was trying to get troops out of somewhere else.
You know, so to get to your point, Ron Martinelli's going to cut a promo. So what he's going to do is he's going to rip a phone book in half.
Ooh.
To show the fans what he's going to do to the mad Iranian.
Going to rip him to pieces just like a phone book.
Yeah. So he starts to, promo starts, 3, 2, 1, go. And he's talking and he goes, yeah, this is what I'm going to do to that mad Iranian. And he gets the phone book. And it's like, he couldn't do it. Okay, cut. Okay. Number 2. Okay, this is what I'm going to do to that mad Iranian. Cut. We went through 6 phone books. He couldn't rip the phone books. And I mean, we're talking a nice, big, thick Yellow Pages phone book.
Yeah.
So we ran out of phone books. So we had to go knock on the door to a neighbor's of Louie's house. Hey, do you happen to have a phone book? And we got a phone book. So then we rigged it a little bit. We cut it in half, already, tore it, and now we're going to show you a video of what happened, because what ended up happening is he's cutting the promo. This is what's going to happen. It's already cut in half, and he's, hiding it so the, TV can't see that it's, already half torn in half. And then he starts ripping it and ripping it and ripping it. And still, we ran out of time, and he still didn't rip it in half.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mad Iranian, watch out. Fraser Hockeyland Arena, Saturday, September 6th.
So, God bless Ron Martinelli, really good guy. We had a fun promotion. We ran shows at the Fraser Hockeyland Arena. Great shows. Some of them are on YouTube if fans care to, go look at them and stuff. And we had a good time.
Yeah.
So, I know that you are a fan of this guy that I'm going to bring up, because he appeared at Kobo only like once or twice and was in the territory for a short time with a gentleman named George Strickland who trained him.
Yeah.
What do you know, or what can you tell us about Dr. Sam Shepard?
Yeah, in the category of some of the most unusual attractions in wrestling, and I mean, you've got sheiks and butchers and sergeants and farmers and convicts, spacemen, cowboys.
Indians.
You've got them all. Lots of unique characters, but I think this is probably the only time, at least that we know of, that a convicted murderer was pushed as an attraction at a professional wrestling show. You've all heard of the movie The Fugitive. And there was also a TV show called The Fugitive, starring David Jansen. The movie starred Harrison Ford. And the movie and TV show were all based on a real-life happening. Dr. Sam Shepard, who was from Cleveland, he was an osteopath, physician, a neurosurgeon, pretty, highfalutin guy there in Cleveland. And he was accused of murdering his pregnant wife back in 1954, but he blamed a bushy-haired intruder. Now, the bushy-haired intruder, for TV and movie purposes, became the one-armed man. But originally, Sam blamed all this on a bushy-haired intruder, and then for the next couple of decades, people are looking for the bushy-haired intruder, and Sam's trying to convince the police that he did in fact exist, and they're trying to find evidence, not so successfully. They held his first trial. He was found guilty. He spent 10 years in prison. At the end of that time, the Supreme Court got involved and overturned the conviction in the first trial. I'm not sure exactly what the basis of their of overturning it was, but then he had a second trial and was exonerated. And people were believing more and more that there was, in fact, somebody else there at the house. In fact, now as you're going on 10, 20 years, DNA is coming into the picture, and they're able to find some DNA of a third person who was actually in the house at that point in time. So anyway, You got the TV show, you got the movie, you have Sam. Sam's out of jail now. He hooks up with George Strickland, who was an old-time wrestler, largely here in Southern Ohio. And George Strickland was soon to become Sam Shepard's father-in-law, because there was a young lady named Colleen who was in her 20s, and she hooked up with 45-year-old Dr. Sam Shepard. And Sam was being taught to wrestle probably on the basis of, we're going to take this around the world. Your notoriety is just going to sell out arenas around the country. Well, number one, Strickland, Sam Shepard was the absolute drizzling, you know what? Wasn't very good. He had been trained maybe for a couple of months, and he was 45 years old at the time he was starting to try to do all this, and that's a little old to try to break into professional wrestling. So he wasn't very good. The people didn't really turn out to see him. They probably counted on a lot of publicity from the newspapers and the television stations, but he wouldn't do interviews. And I don't know whether that was just him being smart, or the lawyer said don't do any interviews. I don't know what legal thing might have still been out there. Maybe he thought he would have said something he shouldn't have said. But anyway, yeah, he mainly wrestled against Porky the Pig.
Yeah, Mike Lauren.
Yep, our good old buddy Mike Lauren, or somebody else who could basically lead him. Now save it. We've got Mike Lauren later in the show.
But he only lasted around here for maybe a month or so?
Well, yeah, that was in 1969, and in 1970 he died of advanced alcoholism. So that was that. And again, as I said, all the way coming in now to 1998 is when the DNA test showed that there was another male at the scene of the murder. So who knows?
Yeah, and I know he worked for Mike LaBelle in the L.A. territory,
Did he?
Which would have been a prime spot to be, with this, with Hollywood and all that other kind of stuff there, but he didn't last long there either. Now, you go back to the bushy-haired other guy. Did they ever find, I shouldn't say Furpo, but, did they ever find that guy?
Oh, they found him on the TV show. They didn't find him in real life.
Oh, okay.
The one-armed man. Actually, the TV guy was a one-armed man with bushy hair, too, so we covered both bases there.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good story on
That was
Sam
sort of
Shepard.
interesting. It's like, Mom, my mother hated wrestling, so did my dad. Who are you going to see? Oh, Dr. Sam Shepard is wrestling. What?
Yeah.
You're going to see a murderer?
Yeah, but he was an actual doctor, though.
Oh, yeah.
As opposed to,
a neurosurgeon. That's about as big as it gets.
Yeah, as opposed to like Dr. Beach or Dr. Jerry Graham or Dr. Jerry Graham Jr.
Dr. Jerry Graham was a tree surgeon. You want a limb removed?
Dr. Ken Ramey and all those other fake doctors.
Right.
The interns, the medics. But good story, Terry.
Yeah, that was a good one. And speaking of which, speaking of characters, one of the all-time biggest characters, most famous, infamous characters, as you have said, if you don't have a story about this guy, which is full of, just full of craziness, basically, you don't have a story. You haven't been around. The one and only, our buddy, Dr. Jerry Graham.
The great Dr. Jerry Graham. And it's like, I don't know if he was an actual doctor or not, or if he had a doctrine. He probably could have bought one. He was lighting his cigars with $100 bills back in the 50s and 60s, what a character.
Yeah.
But back in, I believe it was the 50s, he used to, besides wrestling, he used to do a thing in the ring where he would hypnotize people.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it entailed, if they, went under a spell or something like that.
Supposedly,
He, absconded with their wallet or everything that was in it before they woke up. I don't know. But I know he was doing this as like a, intermission kind of thing,
Yeah.
But, okay, now you say, if you don't have a Dr. Jerry Graham story, you weren't in the wrestling business. So I've got plenty. So let me tell one Dr. Jerry Graham story.
You go right ahead.
Let me think. Here's one. After the Kobo shows, there was times that, some of the boys and us, we'd go to Greektown and, grab dinner, or we'd have to stay after and do promos, things like that. But there was, an earlier time when we weren't doing that because we were, doing the promos up in Williamston at the office. So we would get together. There was a father and son, Frank and Danny Canner. Frank and Danny Canerick.
Yeah.
And Andrea Dubin lived in the same complex as them in Sterling Heights. So we'd jump in the car, a bunch of us, and we'd go up to Sterling Heights and we'd party, in a way at their house. So this had to be one day in like March. So it's still cold, not really warm. It's in between. And at their complex, they had a swimming pool, big swimming pool. And Dr. Jerry Graham shows up. So he's, plops down and he has a drink and stuff like that, and then another drink, and then another drink, and you don't know his penchant for drinks.
Well, you're heading for trouble.
Yeah. So out of nowhere, we're all sitting around, and Dr. Jerry Graham gets up and he strips naked, just takes his clothes off. And he goes to the door, opens up the door, and he's walking outside. It's like, this is at a time when streaking was, popular too. But Dr. Jerry Graham, he ain't running, but, half a mile an hour. No. So he wasn't streaking. He was maybe eking. So anyway, we're watching him, and he goes to the pool. And it's like, what the hell's he going to do at the pool? And he jumps in. He jumped in the pool. Well, and it's like, we're thinking, holy bejesus,
was
that
there water in it?
Yeah.
Okay.
The water had to be like cold, and I'm, figuring he's going to be, come back and go, I was in the pool, shrinkage, Yeah. But anyway, and it's dark outside. So it's like 1 a.m. or so. So here comes Dr. Jerry Graham back, and it's like, holy crap, he just jumped in this pool. And he gets to the door, and it's like, oh my God, he is totally green. There must have been moss and mold and everything else in this pool because it wasn't open yet.
Oh, they hadn't cleaned it?
They hadn't cleaned it. So here he is, his bleach blonde hair was just green and all this stuff in it. And hanging off of him is twigs and green just matter all over the place. And we're like, oh! And now he's walking through the house, naked, and he's wet and dripping. And he just goes directly to the shower, and he showered off, I guess. He come back out, and it's I think we pushed his clothes by the door so he can get dressed.
I wouldn't even let him in my shower.
Yeah. Ugh. So that's one of my, one of many funny Dr. Jerry Graham stories.
And you know what? I've got one too. And I think the next time we do one of these dressing room confidentials, I'll do mine.
Okay.
And it is a doozy, believe me.
But in the meantime, we were talking on the phone one day, and you happened to be talking about gimmicks. And we, everybody back then had a gimmick. Everybody was a character.
Yeah.
And you were telling me about some of your favorite gimmicks.
Yeah. Dr. Jerry Graham was always one of my favorites. A lot of when I was a kid, Chief White Owl, I remember him.
Yeah.
And like you, the Hells Angels, just people who were a little bit out there and a little bit outrageous and really colorful. Yeah, I liked them. There was one that still sticks in my mind that I think is one of the best of all time. A unique pairing and presentation that just really, really got over. It involves Thunderbolt Patterson.
Okay.
Thunderbolt Patterson, one of the top wrestlers of the 60s and 70s, main evented everywhere, had several stays here in the Detroit area. When he first came in, though, he was a bad guy. African-American wrestler. He was sneaky, and he would have the jive talking, and it's like, oh, there's a man talking jive on television. We don't like him. But Patterson came out and he had what you would call a valet, a second.
Right.
And his valet was a young guy, wrestler, a wannabe, by the name, Patterson called him Hamilton. That's all we knew was his last name. But Hamilton's assistant was this bleach blonde white guy, white kid, dressed in a white tux coat, and Patterson used to call him Man Hamilton.
Yep.
Later he called him Man Hamilton. Originally he called him Boy Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
Well, somebody's feathers must have gotten ruffled, and soon Boy Hamilton became a Man Hamilton. But what is going on here? A black guy with basically a slave, this white guy? So, you know, the whole angle and all the feelings that are going to come apart as a result of that. And Patterson was the consummate bad guy. He knew his craft really, really well, and he could rile up that crowd. And then you had Hamilton out there. I think he had a cane that he'd occasionally smack somebody with and interfere on Patterson's behalf. But
I don't think he was interfering.
You don't think so?
No, managers, I have never seen a manager interfere in a match. If they did, you know, put their hands or the cane into the ring, they were trying to bring attention to the referee.
I see.
Something was wrong, or that the good guy was doing something. That's the only thing, you know, that, you know, never interfered.
My folly. But anyway, we're showing pictures, and I'm sure people will remember Thunderbolt Patterson. Hopefully they'll remember Man Hamilton. I just want to tell you a little bit about Man Hamilton.
Okay.
He was a friend of mine later on, not at this particular point in time, but he was from Cincinnati. And I spent a lot of time down in Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. Les Ruffin was right there, and Rick Hamilton was one of the guys that Les Ruffin helped break into wrestling.
Okay.
And helped him train him a little, because he was trained as a wrestler, even though he really didn't wrestle that much. He was an Army vet, spent 2.5 years in Vietnam, and came back with still some part of his sanity, I guess. He was mostly enhancement talent when he did wrestle. He, aside from appearing here, not really a whole lot of other places. He went down to Florida. He was Sir Richard Conrad. Conrad was his last name. And I know you'd remember his wife, Judy, because she was always around him in Cincinnati. And in Florida, he managed a couple of Samoans. And later owned a bar around Cincinnati and passed away several years ago. But I just thought you'd like to know a little bit about the inside scoop about Rick Hamilton.
Yeah. Oh, I remember when T-Bolt brought him in, and, you know, one of his first Kobo appearances. You know, they came out of that tunnel, you know, and, you know, here's, you know, Patterson shucking and jiving into the ring and stuff, and, you know, you had, you know, Man Hamilton or Hamilton, you know, doing his valet stuff and
fold Patterson's jacket, and so they really milked that.
Heat before the bell even rang.
That's right.
You know, and that's what it's all about.
Patterson, one of the all-time greats. Sure, absolutely.
Hey, can I tell you a story? This is a quick one.
Okay.
About our, you know, good friend Mitsu Arakawa.
Sure.
One of the original Japanese wrestlers, you know, we'll say, very heated heel for many years. One of the originators, great trainee, great guy to be around. But have I ever told you about the time he assaulted me?
No.
Yeah. I was assaulted by Mitsu Arakawa.
How did that happen?
Well, assaulted, and I'm, you know, the key word here is salt.
Oh, no. Come on.
Yeah. Remember, it was one of his pre-match rituals.
Yeah.
He would always, you know,
had to ward off the evil spirits.
Yeah, and he always had the salt and, you know, zip. And every time, you know, whatever, you know, we were at, you know, Kobo or we were in Toledo or Dayton, whatever it was, I was always there to take a picture of, you know, trying to get that perfect picture of him, you know, doing his ritual. And every time, right at the end, he had, you know, that still, you know, some salt on his hand. It's like, always right at my camera, right at me. It's like, you know, he'd be bowing, and then finally, all the salt came right at me. And I think I got, you know, finally captured one really good shot of that salt right in the air coming right at me. So that's the time I got assaulted by Mitsu Arakawa.
And now I want to talk about a friend of ours, Phyllis Lee, known as the First Lady of No Holds Barred, and the First Lady of Wrestling. And I think as we show some pictures here, a lot of people will recognize Phyllis, but we just wanted to acknowledge her because of what a wonderful, wonderful person she was. She was from West Unity, Ohio, near Toledo. She started off as a wrestler. Her name was Phyllis Lee Hoffman. Didn't wrestle that long. She settled down, raised her 4 kids. As the kids got a little bit older, she got back involved with wrestling. She was very friendly with a lot of the wrestlers, would drive them around from town to town, feed them, pick up the tab. But as we started the Universal Wrestling Association, Phyllis came on board as one of our promoters. And Phyllis was really, as a female wrestling promoter, doing a lot of the legwork for us, arranging ticket sales, ticket takers, counting the money at the end of the show, making sure that the ring got to the show, the publicity ahead of time. She was doing it all. One thing you might not know is that her husband, Joe, built the ring that we used.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh, I didn't know that.
He was a real handy guy. And so, yeah, they were making about as much money as any of us at that point in time, and none of us were selling a whole lot of records they're setting a whole lot of records because Phyllis was promoting the show and getting her promoter's payoff. Joe was hauling the ring, so he was getting that, and plus one of the kids was probably selling concessions or something, so they were making a little bit of money.
Oh, she was like a den mother to us in a way.
Yeah, an aunt.
Sweet lady, tough as nails, too.
But for those of you who might know Phyllis a little bit, after Big Time Wrestling closed, she got involved with Dan Severn. Prior to his during his pro wrestling days. Prior to him going with UFC. But then when he went to the UFC, so did Phyllis Lee. And Phyllis did as only she can do, built contacts, got to know people. People got to like her and appreciate her. She began to manage a lot of the American guys and would get them booked in Japan, not only here for fights in the States, but she also had strong connections because people liked her in Japan. Part of that was a name from wrestling's past, Carl Gotch, but he was a real influential character over in Japan with the no holds barred, the shoot wrestling, the pancrase, that type of thing. So she also, at one point in time, ran the business end of the Boris Malenko Wrestling Academy.
Really?
And Boris Malenko, father of Dean Malenko and Joe Malenko, one of the primary graduates who was like this with Phyllis and really did regard her as a second mother, was Sean Waltman, who became the Lightning Kid, who became X-Pac. Another one in there, Chris Candido.
Yeah.
And Phyllis would bring them in because they're all coming in to learn how to wrestle, and she would take care of all their arrangements and get them settled and give them a lot of good advice and teach them really some of the not-so-niceties of professional wrestling and how to watch their backs and their wallets, She was the first female MMA manager, represented a lot of the American fighters. She also used her contacts to help people get booked here in the U.S. She was a sweetheart, but she could be a badass when she needed to be, believe me. She passed away in 2015 at the age of 76 after several years of a lot of health difficulties. As I said, she was from West Unity, Ohio, near Toledo, and just a beautiful person and one of my best friends in wrestling.
Yeah, she was a sweetheart. I always remember her coming up to Detroit for the Kobo shows, or we'd see her in Toledo. And like you said, she was gracious of feeding a lot of the guys, driving them, from town to town. And like you said, just a sweetheart of a lady that, really, thank you for bringing that up because she really needs to get some kudos.
Yeah, it's a lot of behind the scenes people that don't get enough props, and she had such a love for the business and the people in it, and such a big heart. She was a wonderful lady.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, somebody that you talk about a big heart, but ribs. Wrestlers are always pulling ribs.
Yeah.
We've been on the good side of them. We've been on the bad side of them. We saw so many of them throughout our careers and stuff. But I remember one, and probably the butt of them a lot of times around for us was the great Kabuki. Ray Elmore, or not Ray Elmore, Ray Urbano. He was always the butt of it. He was just so gullible and stuff.
Yeah, such a sweet guy.
Yeah. And, we've talked about it on other shows where, we did the killing or the shooting of the passenger on the side of the road, and Mike Lauren was involved in that, and, so many with him. But one short one I remember, we drive up to Toronto, for the Tunney shows at Maple Leaf Gardens.
Yeah.
So they were usually right after a Kobo show. So we'd get done with Kobo and, eat and try to get some sleep. And, we'd always head out to Toronto at some point. So usually, the Tunneys were always gracious with everybody. They really knew how to take care of the boys. Mm-hmm. Had great shows, drew great crowds. But after the shows were over, all the boys were almost required to stay, because in Tunney's office, he had a back room there where he'd always have, food for the guys and always beers and everything else. So myself, at the time, I wasn't really welcome into that little realm. So I had to stay outside the office because, I drove up with the boys. So it's like, but over time I was allowed in with them. But I remember one time, one of the first times I was up there, it's like, okay, stay in the office here and, hey, have a seat over here. Sit at my desk. And it's like, okay, wow, Frank Tunney's allowing me to sit at his chair, at his desk. It's like, that's pretty nice. And it's like, he goes off, into the back room, and while he was going, here comes Kabuki. So Kabuki, where are the boys? Well, they're probably back there. I have to make phone call. Oh, okay. So I get up off the chair, and Kabuki sits down. And as soon as Kabuki sits down, it's like, whoa! He jumps up out of the chair. And it's like, what the heck was that all about? Well, it was like a famous rib to all the greenhorns who weren't in on it, because Frank Tunney had his chair electrified.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So you'd sit in his chair, he'd go off into the other room, and he'd flip the switch, and then everybody, would, hear you go, whoa, because his chair was electrified. Yeah. So it's like, I didn't get it. I wasn't electrified. I was supposed to. The rib was supposed to be on me, but I gave the seat up to Kabuki. And poor Ray.
Yeah.
He got the brunt of it.
Yeah. An episode we did in season 2, I believe, on lady wrestlers, and we talked about Heather Feather. She's one of our favorites, and probably the most remembered women wrestler, maybe besides Lucille and Mary Jane of that time period. And Heather disappeared back in the 70s, later 70s at some point in time. And for years, we've always wondered whatever happened to her. And when we talked about the women wrestlers, we put it out there. Say, hey, some of you guys might know where Heather Feather is. Because we have heard that she was running at a speedway, like a gas station.
That's where I ran into her last.
Yeah. And we haven't heard. So I'm going to put it out there again. That'd be a good one to get on this show. Huh? We get Heather Feather on there.
Well,
yes, sir.
You mean Heather Feather?
Heather Feather. Heather Feather, as Bubba Brazil would call her.
Yeah. But her name is Peggy Jones. And if anybody has any info, please, drop us a line, give us a note, let us know, because, we'd really like to know what happened to her, and, if she's still alive or has passed.
Her name was Peggy Jones 50 years ago. It might not still be Peggy Jones.
It could be Peggy Doyle, Because I thought her and Mickey. Well, I'm just kidding.
Don't
start that again.
That's not true.
Yeah, rumors.
Gosh, darn it.
Well, speaking of not true, over time of all the episodes that we've done, our research, we try to be thorough and accurate, but there's times that we get corrected. Our information was wrong or we misspoke, and we're going to deal with that now. We're going to correct all the, what do we call it? The House of Corrections here today?
The Department of
Corrections.
Yeah,
there you go.
Department of Corrections.
So, Terry, if you could take over and
strap yourself in. Yeah. One of the things we talked about was when in the 60s, wrestling ran at the Olympia Stadium, the Arena Gardens, a few other places, but Olympia was the big one. That's where Fred Kohler, who was supplying talent from Chicago, a group then was called the AWA. It's before Vern Gagne's AWA. In fact, Vern Gagne was one of the wrestlers in the AWA. So they ran Olympia. Dick the Bruiser, Layton, all those folks were there. And we said that based on an advertisement and some results, we found that August 1961 was the first wrestling show at Cobo. It was promoted by Jim Barnett and Johnny Doyle, who would come in from California. Doyle was in California. Barnett promoted Chicago, and then they came in and started promoting Detroit, and those were the two that sold to the Sheik in 1965. Well, anyway, August 61, the first Barnett-Doyle show at Cobo. But actually, the first show probably took place at least a month or so earlier. We can't be real positive other than the picture we're going to show you in the paper. The picture we're going to show you on the screen right now is a picture that was taken not by the Barnett-Doyle crew, but by Bert Ruby, Harry Light, the crew that had been here running the smaller towns, running the not spot shows necessarily, but not running Olympia, not running the major towns, more of mid-range.
Motor City Wrestling.
Motor City Wrestling.
Right.
They're the ones that had Channel 7. Well, here's the picture that appeared in the Free Press on May 25th, 1961, shows Larry Shane and Allie Bay, two wrestlers, hoisting the mayor at that time of Detroit. His name was Louis Mariani, and a contract being signed by Bert Ruby and Harry Light in expectation of their first card at the Cobo Arena. So assuming that whatever card they signed a contract for happened before August 1961, that would have been the first card at Cobo. But we don't know for sure because I have tried to find results and can't find them because the results from 50 years ago are sporadic at best. And this is before the Detroit wrestling guy. He started in 64 with his wrestling.
The Sheik?
No, the book about Detroit results. Mark
James.
Mark James. Yeah, he started in 64. So before that, it's really, really haphazard.
Yeah, because Mark James, his book, you should really look this up, wrestling fans. It's through Scott Teal, another Crowbar Press book. It shows almost all the results from the big-time wrestling territory, mostly Detroit, all the Ohio towns, all the Maple Leaf Garden shows in Toronto, and everything in between from 1964 to 1980. It shows results that, God, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And it's a record book that you could look at, and you can see some of the enhancement talent names in there that, I'd long forgotten, and guys that I didn't even know.
It has some wonderful pictures, too.
Yeah, I wonder who supplied those.
I wonder who, you think? Yeah.
Yeah.
And not, did you say not just Detroit wrestling? There are others from around the area.
Yeah.
Like Canton, Toledo, when he's got them.
Yeah, great book to, get.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't have a result of the Burt Ruby show at Cobo. I thought the first Cobo show was the Barnett and Doyle one in August, and well, there's a correction, fans.
Yeah, it's always possible, I suppose, that it didn't happen, but I tend to think that it did.
I would say
and sooner or later, maybe with the help of our fans out there, somebody will come forth and be able to tell us about that. Because I'm thinking it would have been Larry Shane versus Allie Bay. Also, at the same time, though, we had the Larry Shane and Beast. That was right around that time, and that would have been the perfect place to blow that off at Cobo Arena.
Exactly.
So who knows?
Okay.
Another correction.
Really?
Yes, when we took it upon ourselves to talk to you fans about every single tag team combination that has ever wrestled in Detroit, Michigan, we absolutely got every single tag team, didn't we?
I guess we didn't. Well, I know one that I forgot, and I really apologize because this is one of my good friends, handsome Jimmy Valiant, and I forgot all about the Valiants, who worked for the WWA Bruisers promotion. But was there more?
Speaking of Bruiser, we forgot the team of Dick the Bruiser and Bruno Sammartino. Yeah, they had some success around Detroit, I would say. We George and Sandy Scott is going way back into the 60s, but that was one that somebody Fred and Bull Curry, we forgot them.
I thought we mentioned them as like one of those one-off kind of teams, but I guess they did work as a tag team a number of times. Yeah. Okay.
The Fargos, forgot about the Fargos, Donnie and John.
Oh yeah. Forgot about that.
Babyface Nelson, Greg Valentine team. Because
I didn't think of them as a tag team because I can only remember as, Donnie Fargo and having, Johnny Fargo as his valet. Yeah. But they did work as a tag team.
Oh, yeah.
Forgot all about it.
Finally, and this one, again, goes way back into even the early 60s. It's an interesting one, though, Dominic and Dino Bravo.
Yeah.
Dominic was Dominic DiNucci, and he was just getting his start in wrestling. And Dino Bravo was not the Canadian Dino Bravo who was,
murdered.
Who was murdered and had his day in the WWF. This Dino Bravo is a man who is still alive and still living, I think, around Windsor, and he was a good wrestler for quite a number of years. But he used the name Dino Bravo before the perhaps more well-known one. Oh, so those are the tag team combinations.
So that's all our corrections? What?
I've got more.
No, they can't be.
This is just a little clarification. We talked about Guy Mitchell. We talked about how he was one of the assassins in Indianapolis with Joe Tommaso, a veteran wrestler. He was the assassin in Toronto, main eventer up there long before he came down here as Guy Mitchell. He was managed as the assassins not only by Bobby Heenan, but he also had another more infamous manager.
Who would that
whose managing name was criminy. We called him Willie Lump Lump.
Oh,
Captain Willie.
Captain Willie.
New York Raymond. He of body press fame. New York Raymond was one of Guy Mitchell's managers. Yeah.
Really?
Known then as Captain Willie.
I know that had to be in Bruiser's territory because it wouldn't have happened here.
Yeah,
but
it was.
Wow.
When Ben Justice turned into a bad guy in Detroit, I said, it was on the show we did on the Stomper.
Okay.
I said Ben turned on the Stomper in a boxing match, which was Killer Brooks with his second. Who was his second? Do we remember?
I don't remember.
Killer Brooks' second.
Maybe Bull Curry or somebody like that?
Yeah, it could have been. But anyway, they each had a second. Brooks had his second, and it was not Stomper. Brooks's boxing opponent was Louis Martinez in Detroit. And Ben Justice at some point during the match put the ether over his face and put him to sleep. So I was wrong about that. That was not the stomper.
So Ben Justice first turned on Louis Martinez here.
Well, he first turned on Tony Marino in Toledo.
Okay.
But you weren't supposed to know that, because Toledo TV, people in Detroit never watch Toledo TV or vice versa, or people who go to the matches in Toledo and Detroit would never associate those two things, would they? Yeah, in Toledo, Ben turned on Tony Marino, and then in Toledo, the grudge match that happened was the two of them. In Detroit, the grudge match was Ben against Louis.
Wow.
So there you go.
So that's all?
No.
Oh, my Lord.
No. Wrestlers from Hamilton, Ontario.
Okay.
We had the whole list. We forgot Johnny Powers, Angelo Mosca, and according to your friend Bruce Swayze, the Wentworth's gym where all these guys trained, Rocky Johnson, the Dwayne Johnson dad, also was trained there.
Yeah, because Rocky Johnson, people think he was from Atlanta or Florida, but he was from somewhere up in Canada. Wasn't it like Halifax or Nova Scotia?
Could have been.
Yeah. Yes, he's Canadian.
Next quickie, we're almost done here, thankfully. We talked about all the names the Skull Brothers have, but then I think you came up with one that we missed.
Yeah, I forgot about that one. Wasn't it weren't they the Crushers or something? Yeah. Because I know they were the Skull Brothers. They were the Wrecking Crew, and then they split up, and John Medencia, turned into JB Psycho, but then he was also Yukon John.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, they were at one point the Crushers.
Yeah.
It's like very one-off kind of thing.
And finally, we did the fall of big-time wrestling. What happened? What went wrong with big-time wrestling? And there were a number of factors that I went through, and I'm not going to rehash those, though. But there was one major hurdle that the Sheik was sort of unable to get over, one major issue that drained the bank account, and that was Toronto, the loss of Toronto. The Sheik was heavily involved as one of the principal matchmakers in Toronto. My impression is that he concentrated mainly on his matches and making sure that his matches and opponents and future opponents were treated the way he felt that they needed to be treated in order to get that main event rub. So the Sheik, as the main event in Toronto, was collecting the main event pay, the top paycheck for any wrestler on a card is the main event pay. Now, I don't know what the Sheik did in Toronto, but anywhere else he went, he demanded 10% of the gate. Mm-hmm. And is it gonna pay for itself? Yeah, it will. He'll draw the people. So whether he was getting 10% or whether he was just getting his main event pay, he was also getting a booking fee. He was also getting a fee for supplying some of the wrestlers from Detroit. And so that added up into a lot of money. I mean, you're talking about Toronto was drawn 10, 11, 12,000 people, sometimes 8 or 9 or 10, depending upon who his opponent was. Mm-hmm. So, and this was going on once every couple of weeks, and now with all the other money sources drying up, so is this one, because eventually around 75, they eased the Sheik out of his position, both as a main eventer and as their booker. So that was that. And one of the things that began to hurt attendance in Toronto, which led to the Sheik's ouster, was those short matches. And I don't know if I remember talking about the short matches when we talked about Cobo and Detroit, but I think that was a major turnoff to a lot of fans. And, they're paying their good money to come down there. They want to see Dick the Bruiser against the Sheik or Dusty Rhodes against the Sheik. But then what do you end up seeing? A minute and a half.
Yeah, 3 minutes tops.
Yeah.
That's after his, in-ring ritual of, praying and bowing and stuff like that. And, always the number 2 pencil coming out, drawing the blood, and then going home. And it's like, fans were disappointed. And I think the one in Toronto that really killed Toronto at the time, with Big Time Wrestling and Sheik, was when Sheik went against Andre the Giant, and that was like a 3-4 minute match, and
they all were.
Yeah, and that he ended up beating the Giant, and the fans in Toronto just like, we've had enough.
It was a formula that worked really, really well until it didn't.
Yep.
And then, what are you going to do as a fan? He can't beat Andre the Giant. He can't beat Bobo. Can't beat anybody, or nobody can beat him. Why are we coming back?
Yeah, exactly. Well, great episode. Thanks for making all those corrections.
Well,
Thanks, fans, for
I
What?
do have one more. Two more. Yeah.
You're kidding.
I also forgot, when you're talking about reasons that the company started going downhill, one of the things was television. Even though very few people were watching Channel 62, Lord Layton, the preeminent wrestling commentator, was the commentator until he wasn't. And Lord Layton, who was like God to so many people and was wrestling in Detroit, one week he was there, the next week he wasn't. And what super talented announcer, broadcaster did they bring in to replace Lord Layton?
Buzz Benson?
No, he was otherwise
Chuck
taken.
Allen.
No.
Oh, there's only one that, who could have fit the bill, who could have taken over for Lord Layton, sitting right next to me.
Yeah, right.
Terry Sullivan.
One week Lord Layton was there, the next week it was me. And somehow I don't think that if I were a Nielsen family filling out rating books, and I don't think Terry Sullivan would have been quite up there with his lordship, Lord Layton. So I think that didn't really help and was just another domino.
Well, even though Lord Layton was number 1, you're always number 2.
Yeah, that's the way my life goes. Yeah. Finally, we talked about how WCW, Ole Anderson, came in to Michigan. They ran Saginaw, and they ran Bay City and Grand Rapids and Flint. They never came into Detroit because there was no cable in Detroit, and their show was on cable from Georgia, Channel 17, WTBS. And, when the Sheik was having his problems, he just couldn't compete with WTBS and WCW, or couldn't compete with Vince McMahon and what Vince McMahon was bringing in. Whoops. Way to go, genius. No, Vince McMahon was not a part of the Detroit scene while Big Time Wrestling was still in business. No. It was a couple of more years, so I screwed up on that. But like I say, we always try to make it right, always try to set the record straight.
Yeah.
And that is all I've got.
That's all you need to know. Thanks, fans, because, besides the corrections that we made, learning, from watching the episodes and from the fans. Yeah, thank you. We appreciate it. And keep those comments coming on our shows. Take the time. Just, type in whether you liked it, you didn't like it, if you got a correction or if you want to see something in the future, let us know.
Write to us, and as George Cannon would say, send your money.
Don't forget the money.
We're absolutely free. Who's going to pay for us?
And as we do on every show, and even on our, dressing room confidentials, we go do an outro of, one of the wrestlers, and let me have you do one on, one of our favorites. Like if you don't have an outro on this guy, you weren't in the wrestling business. Take us out with an outro on Dr. Jerry Graham.
Oh, ladies and gentlemen, from Phoenix, Arizona. No, we're going to go another direction. Ladies and gentlemen, from New York City, weighing 350 pounds, he is the toast of the coast, the good Dr. Jerry Graham.